Yeah, I had a phone call the other day that was not expected. A business owner who has just leveraged his network, brought lots of people to the table. He's been deeply impacted by this. He called me the other day and said, "Hey, I need to tell you a few things." And I didn't know what I was going to hear on the other line. And he said, "I don't think you know what you're doing."
This is the Made to Advance podcast. I'm your host, Brian Aulick. We're here to inspire and equip you for your best future. What's up, everybody? We've got a great conversation today. My friend Justin Mack is joining us, and Justin is the missions pastor from River Valley Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And River Valley does a ton of great stuff. In fact, River Valley's lead pastor, Rob Ketterling, has been on our podcast before, but Justin leads one of the areas of River Valley that I am most excited about, and that is their commitment to global missions. River Valley currently supports over 1,000 long-term international workers. They send short-term teams from their church to the nations every single week of the year. And then on top of all of that, Justin leads an organization that we're going to have a really good time talking about today, which is called Project 42. Justin's married, he has 3 young kids, and I want to just say, Justin, thank you for joining us on Made to Advance.
Oh, Brian, it's truly an honor. I'll never forget the first time we sat down with you and your wife. I loved your heart, and anything I can do to come alongside of you, I'm honored to be a part of it.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's funny. I haven't thought about that for a while, but we've scheduled, I think, an hour block, if I recall, for that first conversation. And
yeah.
2 hours later, that was just a really life-giving time. You're thankful for times like those. I felt the same way. Yeah, it's really good.
I felt the same way.
Now, sometimes here in Michigan, which is where I am, Michiganders like to complain about the weather. You know, we like to complain about it's snowing or it's cold or these sorts of things. You're based out of Minneapolis, and I always like to say, now I know you're not currently at this very moment in Minneapolis, but if you had to guess what it's like in Minneapolis right now, what would you say?
Oh, man. Normally it'd be insane because we get the worst winters, but this winter has been unseasonably warm and nice, but there's snow on the ground, and you need to bundle up before you go outside. And I would say to Michiganders, quit being so soft. Come to Minnesota and feel what cold is really all about. So now that I've alienated half the audience or whatever.
Well, I love it because anytime I feel bad about Michigan weather and I get a little grumpy about, oh, it's this or it's that, then I'll just jump on. Now that I have so many friends in Minneapolis, I'll jump on to whatever the forecast is in your neighborhood, and I'm like, wow, it's balmy outside. I feel like this is, I'm blessed right now. So
yeah, and the crazy part, Brian, is I'm from Arizona, and people think I'm crazy from moving from Phoenix, Arizona, to Minnesota. But I love the seasons. I even like the cold. Just have to have the right gear.
Yeah. Wow. That is crazy. Arizona to Minneapolis. That's God is at work in your story, Justin.
He is.
So you're the River Valley's missions pastor. You've been there for 17 years. Yeah. And what size was River Valley when you first joined the staff?
Oh, man. It was a few hundred. We had one campus. I would say probably 500-600 is what I would guess. But the heart and the passion that Pastor Rob has this day was the same he had back in the day. And so that's what drew me to the church. It wasn't the size. It wasn't the style. It was the heart for the nations, Pastor Rob's leadership. And so this summer will be 18 years. And so now how many of our campuses? I think it's 14 or 15 campuses. And the missions vision has remained the same, but the scope of it has just exponentially grown, which is incredible to be a part of.
Did you start out as a missions pastor at River Valley right off the bat? That was your role?
Yes, plus. So I told Pastor Rob, I said, my heart is missions, but I know we're a young church, a growing church. And so anything you want me to do that you think I could help with, I'm happy to do it. Just let me have my hand in missions. And so I've bounced around from it was small groups and men's ministry at one time, women's ministry, and was one of our campus pastors. I didn't do it. I just kind of helped some certain parts of it. But yeah, I've had a bunch of different roles, but missions has always from day one been the passion and been a part of what I did. Now it's mainly all that I do at River Valley. Have the honor of being a part of the lead team, but really my focus is what we call Kingdom Builders and Global Project.
It's crazy to think about how you've had to scale yourself over the years. Then I mean, it's one thing to come in and to be able to serve the missions vision, and it's funny when you're at church plant or a smaller church. I mean, you've kind of got everything on the job description, but to scale at that level over those many years, for you, was that a very organic sense of growth, or did you have to network and retool yourself in order to kind of keep up with the level of scaling you had to do?
Yeah, for sure. Did a lot of reading, still do a lot of Audible. When I'm traveling, I do Audible all the time. I did go to Fuller Seminary, get a master's in missiology, so a lot of self-development. Mm-hmm. I remember, I'll give you an example. We were struggling to get missions teams. You mentioned in the intro that we do a missions team every week, and now it's every 3 days that we're actually sending out a team every 3 to 4 days. So we'll send out 80 teams. But I remember when we were struggling to get people to join 1 or 2 teams, and I read a book called Freakonomics, where it looks at the opposite side of problems and says, maybe we're looking at this wrong. And it just sparked this idea that the factors that have to align for somebody to go on a global team, this is just one example of scalability. All the factors that have to align for somebody to go on one global team is pretty significant. The timing has to be right. The price has to be right. The location has to be right. They have to like the team leader. The type of ministry has to be amiable to maybe their skill set. And I just thought, if we could do 10 or 12 trips, we can have 12 different price points, 12 different team leaders recruiting, 12 different types of ministry, 12 different locations. And I just thought, it's probably not that we're offering so few trips. It's actually probably not that we need to offer more trips.
Yeah.
So I convinced Pastor Rob to let me hire somebody part-time. And I said, I think we can raise the rest of the money. And so we did that. We did 12 trips, and lo and behold, they filled up like right now. And then we scaled to 20 and they filled up, and 30. So we're just giving people 30, 40 times the opportunity that we were when we were doing 1 or 2. Now, there's a lot of logistics behind the scenes that you have to figure out as a leader. But if you can present the opportunity to the people that want to be a part, it can just explode. And that's what we've seen. So we just take one model, try to perfect that model, and then try to scale it over and over and over, whether that's in projects, whether that's in trips, whether that's in missionary support, whatever it is. Can you perfect one thing and now multiply that one thing over and over and over?
Gotcha. That makes sense. Cool that reading a book like Freakonomics is what was the generation of that idea. And it just goes to show you that reading broadly, I mean, that's not what we would normally call, this is what missions pastors read, is Freakonomics. Yeah, and I think it's really cool to see how reading broadly outside of your discipline, you can pick up ideas, or it can catalyze some kind of thought that then in this case led you to the principle of, hey, the more options, the more people will opt. Now, you've got
that's a good point.
The day job is missions pastor at River Valley. But then you have this whole other thing, which is what we're going to spend some time on today, called Project 42. And maybe you could just tell us a little bit of the heart that led up to Project 42, and that will get us into what Project 42 is. Yeah.
So serving as missions pastor at River Valley, I've traveled the world and had incredible opportunities to meet some amazing people. And somewhere along the lines, I heard that 42% of the world had never heard the gospel. It's not that they rejected it, not that they ignored it, not that they have just picked a different path. They've never had the opportunity to hear how much Jesus loves them. And that fact just started to get into my heart and my mind, and quite frankly, just frustrated me and said, that's not fair. It's not just, it's not right. somebody needs to do more about this. And so I would just tell any like Christian celebrity or any person that would come across my path this problem and see if they would take up this cause and run with it. And the response was always kind. The response was always very cordial. But I could tell in their eyes and in their spirit, like, I don't know what to do with that. Yeah. And so my wife and I, the more we prayed, the more we talked, we just said, we have to stop talking about it and just do something about it. And so it really created a lot of insecurities in us, Brian, if I'm being real honest, because I'm not this mega church pastor. I'm not Brian Aulick. I'm not Pastor Rob Ketterling. I'm not this major entrepreneur or this author or podcaster. I'm a missions pastor at an amazing church. And my wife and I just felt like we have to try. We have to do something. And so we decided that we would just ask some friends, some pastors, some leaders to come together for this gathering. We just called it Project 42. Our project is going to be the 42% that have never heard. And we just said, I think we can convince some people to get together at this gathering. And so we put up our own money to sign the contract at this really nice resort in Colorado. This is in 2018.
Hold on. And now, how much money and how did you come up with it? That's an important part of the story. I'm not sure. Are you okay with talking about that?
Oh, yeah, I'll talk about whatever you want. So it was just an idea, Brian. It was just my best idea was like, just get some people that might believe in you and believe in the vision and see where the Lord takes it. And so we weren't a nonprofit, didn't even intend to become a nonprofit. We actually came under the fiscal sponsorship of another nonprofit so that we could receive donations. But before even that point, we decided we got to pick a nice location to convince people to come to this thing for a couple of days and cast vision and share our heart. And so we looked at some really nice resorts off season. So I said, okay, there's a ski season in Colorado that's very expensive, but there's another season that's not expensive, but it's in an amazing place. And so I contacted them. I said, if I had like 50 people show up at this thing, how much would you give me rooms for? How much would it cost me? And all the food, everything all in, I calculated would be about $50,000 to $60,000. And so my wife and I said, we could scrape that together with a little bit of savings, a little bit of credit card, a little bit of whatever. And if no one shows up, we can pay our bills. And so we signed the contract. I remember sending them the contract with my signature. And I was like, Tara, what did we just do? This was our kids' education. This was whatever. Yeah. And we said, if it was our lost child, if our kids were among the 42% that never heard how much Jesus loved, what would we be willing to risk? And we just said, we'd risk everything.
There it is.
So risking $60,000, thinking about, okay, they're not our kids, but they are the kids that Jesus loves and gave his life for. So why in the world would we not risk at least trying? So we did that. And then I remember emailing an acquaintance. I wouldn't even say friend, but a guy that I knew shared this passion that might have some resources. I emailed him and in fact, no, I'm sorry. I talked to him and it was a 3-minute conversation. I told him what I was trying to do. And I said, I'm trying to raise $60,000 of seed money to start this thing. I've already put the money up, but I really honestly don't have it. And he said, sounds good. Send me details. Shoot me an email. And I thought he was just trying to get me off the phone call because it was about 3 minutes long, Brian. And I was sitting in church like a week and a half later after I'd emailed him all the details. And I thought he's going to find some detail that he doesn't like and not, because he said, yes, he's in. And I was like, did you hear me say 60 or did you hear me say 6? Because it was way too fast of a yes.
Right.
And so I was like, he's going to find something, the details he doesn't like. But I was sitting in church and the email came through and he said, I'll send you half. Tell me where to send it. And that was just a miracle.
Wow.
Because he shouldn't have said yes, but something about it. I think the Lord was working in him before even that conversation. And so
which is a great point, Justin. I want to just summarize some of what you've said, because there's so much good stuff here for somebody who's thinking about taking a next step. One, you had a burden and a passion. It was leading you to talk about it, but you couldn't find anybody else to pick up the ball. So finally you said, I'm not the guy that I would have thought would be the guy, but apparently I've got a burden here and I can't just sit with it. And I just love that you didn't let that stop you. You took a risk financially. That was a big faith step, and you did it. It was like a sane risk, because it wasn't, oh my goodness, we're not going to be able to keep our electricity on with this risk. But
right.
So it was measured, but that was still a big faith risk. That's a lot of money. And then I love what you just said too, and I want to kind of emphasize that point. God was already working and doing something in this man's life. And that when you're operating in faith on your side, God's already doing stuff around you, through others, preparing
100%. All
this. This is so good to remember, because sometimes we feel all alone in our journey and our risk. And in reality, God's got a whole bigger thing going on, and he's getting ready for us to take our step, just like he's preparing somebody else to take theirs. So many good things in what you just said. So let's keep going, though. Tell me more.
Well, let me say something about that. And maybe Pastor Brian, you're maybe more theologically sound than I am, but I have this theory, and I haven't had anyone counteract it. You remember the boy in the crowd of the 5,000? He had a little bit of bread, a little bit of fish, and they need to feed this massive crowd, 5,000 men, plus Scripture says women and children. So we don't know the size. It could have been 15,000, 30,000. And this little boy gives his lunch to one of the disciples, and then they take it to Jesus. Jesus bless it, breaks it. And now we know the story that this little boy's lunch, when you think back, you're like, that's absurd. What can this one little boy's lunch do to impact such a large need? And that's the way I felt. I felt like, I'm just this little guy. I mean, 42% of the world, we're talking 3.4 billion people. What could my little do to impact such a great need? And I felt like this little boy, but here's my theory, is I think when that little boy pulled out what he had, the bread and the fish, other people looked around and said, maybe I should share what I've got. Because there had to be another mom in the crowd that had the foresight. Now, we know a miracle happened because Scripture says that Jesus blessed it in a miracle.
Yeah.
But don't you think, Brian, that other people started looking around and started sharing what they had? And I think that's kind of what happened in our situation, is we did what we could do and other people did what they could do. And together this miracle starts to take place. And so the rest of the story, so we hold this gathering. We got 41 people to show up, this thing that we called Project 42. And we cast this vision that we wanted to help as many missionaries go into difficult and restricted access, places that you can't normally get into without a legitimate legal reason for being there. And we just said 100% of what we raise is going to go to help support missionaries and organizations providing access for those that have never heard that Jesus loves them. And this group pledged over $420,000. More than that came in, but they pledged $420,000.
Wow.
And we took a picture of this group, Brian, at the end. And my sister-in-law, who was there, saw the picture and she recounted my count. And she said, you're miscounting. It's not 41. There's 42 people in this picture. And I said, I know how to count to 42. Like, there's only 41 people in the picture. And she says, no, you're miscounting, because Tara, your wife, she is pregnant with Savannah. And so she's sitting in that. That's a human. There's 42 people. You called it Project 42. You raised $420,000. So it was confirmation after confirmation after confirmation. Wow. And we came back. We started the nonprofit. We took it outside the fiscal sponsorship. And we've done it every year. And now it's millions and millions a year are going to the front lines of the unreached. And we don't even have one full-time employee. We got 10 very part-time employees, but full-time passion. But it just started with this step of obedience and really frustration of like, we have to be able to do more. We have to do what we can do and see what God does with it.
And it's still, even after all these years, it's still that the internal expenses are all covered by other means, and all of the money is raised, like through the gathering and such, are all external. Is that still the case?
Yeah. So the way we do it is we do this annual gathering. We may have to expand beyond one, but right now we just do one annual gathering a year and bring everyone together, Project 42 community of leaders and business owners and foundations, and anyone that wants to help provide access for the unreached comes together at this gathering. And what we do is we get sponsors to pay for all that expense so that the expense of that gathering does not inhibit us from giving to the front lines. And so 100% of what is given now can go to the front lines. And so it does take money to run an organization, but the cost of that gathering is covered through a handful of sponsors.
Yeah, that's really cool. And just, I don't know if you'll know this number off the top, but do you have a sense for how much money was released for the front lines in the last year or so?
Oh, millions. Specifically, I probably should know this. I could ask our accountant.
Hazard a guess.
Our goal. I know our goal this year is we want to do over 3 million this year. So okay. I would guess last year was maybe 2.5 million.
Yeah. So that's so exciting. I mean, to think about going from $420,000 that first year, and how many years ago again was that launch, that first?
So that first gathering was November 2018.
2018, yeah. So we're really not that far out from 2018. And to have God raising up millions and to see you guys investing it in all of the most strategic places. I love what you said earlier, too, about when you think about your heart for the 42 and paralleling it to what our heart would be for our own children. It's so important. I think that when we make resource allocation decisions, it's easy to think. I remember years ago, I was so confronted with my own hypocrisy. I was debating whether I was going to support someone who was being sent somewhere, and I don't know what they were asking for $50 or $75, and we at the time we were definitely doing a lot of support already, and we were definitely feeling financially constricted at that time, and I remember thinking, I don't know if we should do it, and we're supporting all these other people, and then that same weekend, I walked into a store and I saw the sweetest pair of Nikes. And I kid you not, I instinctively bought those things. And right after I walked out of the store, I sensed the Spirit of God saying, you will spend money that quickly, even when money is tight, you will spend money that quickly for a pair of shoes. But for a child who has no hope of hearing about Jesus, you have to deliberate. You have to pray about it. You have to take all this time. And honestly, at that point, I was landing on the side of no. I think we're going to pass on this one. And I promptly went home and I sent a different kind of email. So, oh man. So when it comes to the journey, so you launched the first gathering. The 41 people or 42 that showed up. Largely through relationships, I'm guessing, that just,
100%.
Yeah, okay. So just tapping.
So even to this date, we don't even do any marketing.
Okay.
So we do have a website. We don't do social media. It's just word of mouth, friend to friend, person to person, pastor to pastor, business leader. It's twofold. One, I think the best marketing is when it's not from you, but somebody else's talking about the impact or talking about the value that they see in it. So I think there's a power in that. I think marketing does raise awareness, but it doesn't create engagement. Engagement comes from like personal connection. Mm-hmm. So I think it's strategic, but the other is a lot of what we do does require a lot of security because of all of our partners are in restricted areas where if we shouted their names or where they were and what they did, there's some security challenges to that. So there is some strategic reasons why we don't do much marketing.
That makes sense. Well, it's cool to hear too. I mean, obviously that first year, it really is probably mostly, perhaps even entirely, you or your wife having those conversations with prospective guests. It's cool. Sure. It sounds like now it really is guests. I'm sure you guys are still making asks all the time, but it's really guests who believe in what you're doing and are passionate about it, that they're actually carrying the baton and making some of those asks as well. That's cool.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. This last year was the first year that more people showed up that we didn't personally know than before. So every year before it was, I know that person. I met that person. It's Brian. It's this person.
Yeah.
This year it was like, I don't know how they heard about it. I hope they're cool and hope they know what they were showing up for.
Yeah.
And what means a lot to me, and I've told several people, I told you this, Brian, because you've been so gracious with your friends and encouraging people to be a part of it. But and when somebody gives, that's one level of like encouragement. It's like, wow, you believe in this, you trust us, and that means a ton. But to leverage relationship is a whole nother level.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are some people that just believe this, I think, more than we believe in it. It seems, because they're so passionate, and man, that means so much to us. And but you're right, it gets in people's heart, captures their vision, and they begin to talk about it, and it helps.
Yeah, and if I can just make a little bit of a commercial, if you are a business leader or a pastor and you're listening to this, go to Project 42's website and investigate a next step. Our church, we have our own Kingdom Builders fund that helps really us resource a lot of our global priorities, and we just gave to Project 42 this last year, and look into the gathering and look into supporting Project 42. It's an unbelievable opportunity. Let me ask you, Justin. So you launched the first year. Is for every subsequent year, and probably been about 7 now, if I'm getting my math right, or 6, I don't know, 18, and it's 2024, so 6. But so is it largely you're able to kind of run the same play as an organization year after year, and you just need some more people, or have there been ways you've had to shift and morph and pivot along the way? Have there been things you've added, or is it no, we keep it simple and basically we've been doing what we've been doing for the last number of years?
Yeah, we try to keep it simple, but as things grow, the scale grows. You go from my wife and I, that's pretty simple, to now we have a team of 10. And so you've got HR stuff, you got insurance, you got payroll, and you got bank accounts, and you got boards, and you got filing. And so just things that we do an annual in Minnesota. Once you cross a certain threshold, you have to do an annual audit, which is good. So you stay compliant. So you're doing things in a proper way. So we're all cool with that. But I'm not an accountant. I don't know everything that they need to know. And so you have to hire an accountant. You have to do all those things. And so the scalability does create a complexibility, but the vision is the same. The formula, if you can say that, where it's find great people going to the front lines of the unreached and raise awareness and resources. That's what we do. And so how you report that to a church or to a business or a foundation or an individual that has a lot of knowledge. I remember sitting down with you, and you knew these things as well as I know them. There's other people that this is the first time they've ever heard about the unreached, and they don't even know what that word means. And so you have to learn how to communicate better to certain groups of people, just because they're not up to speed with some things, and other people, they're outpacing you. And so you're like, okay, well, how do we convince them that we're a trustworthy source? And so it does require some flexibility and scalability, and there's lots of things when you start something you don't even think about.
Right.
You just got this passion and vision, but we just had something with a bank account where there's this form that in Wisconsin we need to fill out, and we're like, what? Who tells you this stuff? Until they tell you don't know you have to do it. And you're like, I never thought about forms in Wisconsin when I started this thing out of Minnesota that I needed to fill out. So,
it strikes me.
It's just business stuff.
We were talking about the 42%. I think you're probably familiar with the language of the great imbalance. And if so, maybe you could speak to that too, just because I think that's great for people to hear.
Yeah, so according to World Christian Encyclopedia, who every 10 years or so, they study the landscape of global Christianity, and Harvard, all the Ivy League schools look at their research. It's a massive book. They study all kinds of details, and according to them, less than 1% of current church resources in America are used to reach the 42% that are unreached. And so 99% of our resources are going to take care of the needs in our community, in our church, areas that are already reached, already have the gospel representation. but less than 1% is going. So the unequal distribution of resources as it relates to all the people groups, every tribe, every tongue, every nation, knowing that Jesus loves them, there's a huge imbalance. In fact, somebody did the math and said that we spend more on Halloween costumes for our pets every year than we do for the unreached.
Wow.
So there's a big imbalance.
And the imbalance carries over to sending in actual people too, from my understanding. So we send about 1% of our mission dollars towards the unreached. And am I right in understanding it's about 3% of those who are sent globally go from the American church, go to unreached places? Is that accurate?
That's accurate. I've seen anywhere from 3%. The highest percent I've ever seen was 10%, but most would say 3% is the percentage of missionaries that are going to leave here and go somewhere. That's staggering. And there's reason for it. A lot of the unreached places, we say that there's not easy places left.
Yeah.
There's a reason they're unreached. There's a reason that, and a lot of times it's financially difficult, security-wise it's difficult. A lot of our partners deal with daily challenges with security, whether it's interrogation, imprisonment, torture. My wife and I were just in a country about a month and a half ago, and we were sitting with a woman our age, Brian, that has her daughter sitting right there. Her husband's been in prison for 10 months, can't get out, and tortured daily. Like, this isn't like ancient history stuff.
Yeah.
This is right now, today, 2024. There's people who are being persecuted for their faith, being tortured for their faith, and largely the American church is unaware of it. I don't even think they're apathetic. I just think they're uneducated and unaware of it. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that we want to do is raise the awareness. And we don't think people are going to solve a problem that they don't know about. And so if we can let people know about this challenge, the unequal balance of resources, people are saying, okay, I can do more. I can be more sacrificial. I can be more strategic with my resources. So,
yeah, I think that's so good. I think that I'm going to go back to that shoe example for me of purchasing the shoes. Every day, if you're in the U.S., you have a million opportunities and places that you can spend your money, and all of that is competing for your attention and your heart. And so you really have to make a concerted effort to say, I'm going to fill my heart and mind with other things. I'm going to expose my mind to what's going on in other places of the world. Even being with you guys, as much as I've read, as much as I'm familiar with global realities, hearing some of the stories that were shared, and I know you guys said flat out, don't bring your phones in. Don't even turn them off. Don't even bring them in the room. And hearing stories of what believers are going through in other parts of the world, and you hear stories like that. And all of a sudden, you just have a little bit different perspective on, do I really need another pair of this? And I know you would be the first one to say, vacations are not bad. Buying things and having fun is not bad, but it's perspective on, okay, when's enough, and when are there needs that are bigger? Now, I want to ask you a question about, some might hear you say, hold on, this guy's got a full-time job working for River Valley. And that by itself, River Valley, we've already discussed, doing tons of stuff. So you've got to oversee all of that. And then, he also is moonlighting over here for Project 42. How do you and your wife figure this out on the time side of things? How do you make it work?
Brian, this is such a good question, and I'm not even exaggerating. My wife and I went for an hour walk this morning. Our kids are at home with Grandma and Grandpa, and we're down at this church. And so we went for a walk this morning, and this is the very thing we talked about it. And it's not a problem that you can solve. It's a tension you have to manage and put certain roadblocks in place, certain boundaries, conversations, and you keep talking, you keep adjusting, you keep analyzing it. And to be honest, the first thing, and I didn't do this well, admittedly, I got the ball rolling before I got the blessing of Pastor Rob. I didn't know that this was going to become as big a deal as it has become. I literally just thought it's getting a few people together, raising some money, helping some missionaries. And so I had to go back and apologize and say, hey, this has become bigger than I realized. Will you give my blessing? And that's not the proper order, but thank the Lord for Pastor Rob's grace. The elders said, no, we see God's hand on this. We see God's hand on your life, and we give you blessing. And so I think the first thing is, are you being faithful to your first thing? And have you gotten the blessing of that? And do you have the margin? And for me, the Lord has just brought incredible people into our life on both sides, the River Valley and the Project 42 side, to support it so that we can really lead, cast vision, and they take care of a lot of the details, a lot of the things that I literally don't have time for or margin for. And so that's just praying that the Lord brings the right people at the right time, that you have the resources to hire them. We have some people on our team that won't let us pay them. They're just like, nope, this is our passion. This is our way of honoring the Lord. And that's just a miracle. But yeah, it is hard, Brian, because there's days where I feel like I got this down. And there's others days like, this thing is about to bury me. And you look at the pattern of those days, and more often than not, 80% of the time, Tara and I feel like we got this. We're good. We're doing exactly. And there's others where we got to figure out some things. So
yeah,
I don't know. It's a good question. If you got it figured out, let me know.
Well, I think what it's a weird, because you're what may sound like a non-solution is the solution, and that is, it's not a problem to be solved to say it the way you just did. It's not a problem to be figured out or a question to be answered so much as it is a tension to be navigated. And I think that Christina and I find ourselves in this same place where even when we do for a season have kind of a formula or a pattern that we feel like is working, then whether it's because of kids or because of ministry and other kinds of commitments we have, the same pattern that worked 3 months ago all of a sudden is not doing its job. So we try to do the same thing where we have a regular communication on how life is going, how are we feeling about our respective schedules. Friday mornings we do a big drive. I've shared this with our church before, where we go to one of our favorite coffee places and we get some coffee and we get a muffin, and then we just drive and we talk about heart stuff, but we also talk about logistics, and sometimes we'll have other meetings for calendaring and things, but just constantly recalibrating and all that. And some of this is seasons too. Seasons, sometimes you're just ramped up more in one place than another. How do you guys, when it comes to balancing, with you both working on it, and I don't know exactly what Tara's role is, how does that whole, for couples who want to do something together, how does that work with the two of you leading together? I mean, are you complementary roles, or is it ever hard? How does that work, the marriage dynamic? Yeah,
so Tara definitely does not report to me, and I don't report to Tara, so that's not a good dynamic there. But her primary is our family. She's such a good mom. She takes care of our home, and this is not a side gig to her. This is not an extra. Like, this is, if you met Tara, and you have, I know, Brian, like, her heart beats for this.
Yeah.
Like, she gets teared up. She just, like, her heart for her friends that are going to the front lines, those that are willing to sacrifice many things that we wouldn't even think about, they're sacrificing and doing it joyfully as unto the Lord. And so we've just said, whatever margin you've got, Tara, we'll take it, we'll use it, but you determine what kind of margin. And so she helps out in a lot of different ways. She does some speaking. She is very, very involved, but limited, and so it's primarily a thing that I carry, but she is very, very involved.
Well, I think back to even the whole balance thing and how do you make it all work, that, though you didn't explicitly state it because it was implicit from the very beginning, being on the same page with your spouse is such a big deal, particularly of course in general, but particularly when you're taking on extra things. If they see the vision as Tara does and feels that burden deeply, then some of these sacrifices that come with making it all happen, I mean, she's right there with you in it. She gets it. That's her heart too, and it gives you some more stamina when it comes to some of the moments where everything is not fun and roses and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think you said it, Brian, too, but it's constant check-ins. It's the emotional check-ins, it's the logistical check-ins, it's the financial check-in. Like, you're checking in on every area of your life to say, is this still working? What adjustments do we have to make? It's not a one-time solves it all.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to and be honest and open-handed about it, because as passionate as you are, if you fail with the family, if you fail on that front, everything else starts to fall apart. And it's just like, okay, Tara, where are you at? Is this still working for you? Is this still working for us? Does this still work for the family? And do we need to make adjustments? That literally was the conversation this morning.
Yeah.
Is, how are you doing? What mile markers do we need to check in at? Where do we need to make adjustments? And thankfully we feel good. There's some things that we do definitely need to do differently. But nothing major. We can make those adjustments and keep it rolling. Give us an example of whether it's the current adjustments that you just spoke about this morning or in the past. Yeah. Give us an example practically of here's a place that we said, okay, what if we shift this, or we need to do this a little bit differently in order to make it work better for our overall lives and marriage. Okay, so we had two friends that were our kids' favorite babysitters. I mean, they actually could not wait for us to get out of town and go speak somewhere or go do something, because they made it so fun and so incredible. So we just took them to the airport about 2 weeks ago, and they're now in a restricted access country. Can't even say the name, and they're gone. And this is the first trip now, the trip that we're on, the first trip that they haven't been there. And there was tears shed when we got on the plane and left this time. And so Tara and I are talking to just say, when we do a trip, do we bring one of the kids? Do we bring the kids with us? Do you stay home? We don't have a solution yet for Sam and Tasana gone. You know, that just happened. And before going was actually easy for us because they couldn't wait for us to go, because that meant party for them. Yeah. Well, we don't have that anymore. That season has changed. And so we just have to either say, Lord, do we need to change something? Or is there somebody else that's about to step into our life we don't even know yet that's going to take this part of the equation and help carry it for us? We've talked about each trip. Do we take one of the kids and make it special and they get to help out? So we haven't figured that out, but part of it is like, we've got to make sure. I grew up as a pastor's kid in a really healthy home. Not perfect, but I don't resent ministry. I didn't resent what my parents did. I didn't resent how many people wanted their time and their attention. And I don't want that for my kids. I'm not willing to do that for my kids. Like I want them to feel excited about, our church and excited about the ministry the Lord has put on our heart. And so that is a litmus test too. Pastor Rob has this, he's like, you can only move as fast as your family. You don't want to lose your inheritance. You don't want to run so fast that you've lost your family. And so it's not their fault that the Lord has, put this on our heart. We have to check in with them. How are you guys doing? Not just Tara and I, but Amelia, how are you doing? William, how are you doing? Savannah, how are you doing? And so keep that proper balance. That's really good. And, particularly in the mission space, you're familiar with the stories, as am I, where you have folks who are really passionate for the kingdom of God, carried a major burden for people who are unreached, and ended up laying their own families on the altar in I would say, an unhealthy way, or their marriage crashed because it became all about the cause. And so it really is one of those tough things where you have to take that God-given burden and calling and recognize that is one aspect of my calling, but my calling as a husband and as a father are right there too. And winning at 1 out of 3 is not success. It's got to be on every front. Justin, when you look back at now these few years of Project 42, what do you feel like are just the most satisfying, rewarding things that come to your mind when you just reflect on these last years of leading this ministry? Oh, that's a great question. What makes you want to cry sometimes? I don't know if you're a crier. I am at times with when something significant happens. But what are those times that make you just go, I just want to weep at the goodness of God at this moment? Yeah, I had a phone call the other day that was not expected. A business owner who has just leveraged his network, brought lots of people to the table. He's been deeply impacted by this. He called me the other day and said, "Hey, I need to tell you a few things." And I didn't know what I was going to hear on the other line. And he said, "I don't think you know what you're doing." This is what he said to me.
Yeah, that's
like,
great. Everybody needs a friend like that.
I thought we were cool. And he said, no, wait, let me explain. I said, dude, you do need to explain because I thought we were cool. But he was like, no, we are cool. And he said, I think you thought what you were doing when you started this was helping those willing to go to the front lines of the unreached, these difficult and dangerous places. And he goes, you certainly are doing that. And that's the large aim of Project 42. He goes, but what I don't think you realize you're doing is helping business leaders and business owners reframe what they think is success, putting purpose to the resources that they have, that it's not just for their pleasure. It's not just for a bigger, better, nicer, newer, and all those things, not trying to throw shade onto that, but that there's more purpose to why the Lord has put that wealth in your hands. And he goes, this has helped reframe my view of the resources that I have, that I can actually help move the kingdom forward in places where the church has not yet been established. And this is reframing a lot of our friends' perspective. And so I say that to say, you think you know what you're getting into and why you're doing what you're doing, but God has bigger purposes, bigger plans, different purposes and different plans than what you could ever imagine. And when you just keep taking those steps of obedience, he reveals how much bigger than this is than what you think it is. And that was really powerful to me. Was like, I thought I knew why I was doing this. But God's like, no, I've got dimensions to this. I got purposes to this that you've never even thought of. You didn't even try to do it. I'm doing something bigger than you can. So I think it's just realizing I offered what I had, like that little boy with the loaf and fish.
Yeah.
But God's doing miracles far bigger than what I could have calculated or coordinated.
Gosh, I love that. I know when people hear that, that's going to be so encouraging because, man, if we're just willing, and that's the thing,
so.
we talk ourselves out of the steps that we feel like God's calling us to take for so many reasons. I'm not qualified. It's too small. It doesn't feel that grandiose. It's not going to make that big of an impact. Who's going to care? All these different reasons that the enemy will come up with, and our own weakness will come up with on not to do something. And I love what you said, because it's like you take that step of obedience, whatever it is, and not only in this case has it resulted in really encouraging fruit relative to the purpose for which you took the initial step, but it's just gone so far beyond that. And I there's probably a spiritual principle here. I'd have to do some Bible thinking on this one, but the idea that obedience just in general has a catalytic effect on other people. It's contagious when you see one person taking a step, and I love that. Tell us when we're thinking about you're thinking about the future of Project 42. You're in as far as you're in. Anything coming down the pike that you're dreaming about, praying about? How do you handle the whole vision thing in general? We all want to walk in faith and obedience, but how do you do the vision casting thing?
Oh, man. It's a good question, Brian. Can I go back to what you just said real quick?
Go for it.
Because I think there's a lot of people that have an idea to start something, and maybe they have started it, but then insecurity, doubt, they know their own limitations just start to just flood their mind, flood their heart, and they're trying to be obedient, but they're looking at their reality. And Tara and I had that several times where we almost stopped this, even though the Lord answered prayers. Like, we almost stopped this before it ever got started. And I remember sitting down with this guy. He came in to speak at our church, and this man has an amazing ministry. He sat with the last 5 presidents. He's world renowned. And I said, tell me the story about your ministry before it ever got started. He goes, I've read your book, and I know where you start the story, but tell me the story before the story, because it starts pretty glamorous. And I know things don't always start so glamorous. And he goes, okay, So he told me his situation, and the first 4 years didn't go very well. And I said, okay, stop right there. Tell me what you held on to at the beginning when it wasn't going the way you thought it was. And he goes, it was 3 things. And Brian, this is like right when Tara and I were like starting Project 42. And I was like, oh, he has no idea how timely this is.
Yeah.
And so he said, the first question I kept asking myself during those 4 years is, does this matter? Like what I'm trying to do, does it matter? And he goes, yes, it matters. He goes, okay. Number 2, does it matter to God? Because there's a lot of things that we think matter, but in the grand scheme of eternal things, it doesn't. And he's like, no, this really matters to God. And he goes, the third question is the most insecure question, is like, can I really do anything about it? And he goes, I wasn't going to let my part be the part that caused this to fall apart. And so he goes, I just kept being faithful. I just kept tweaking things, changing things. And then, his story, Oprah put him on, and then he was on 60 Minutes, and then it was like, okay, great. I just need Oprah to hear about this. But the principle of like, man, what I'm trying to do matters.
Yeah.
And it matters to God. And yes, I can do something. It may not be huge, but I can do something about it. And so I'm not going to not do my part. And I just want to encourage people that if you've got this passion, if you've got this drive, the Lord's put that in you for a purpose. Just keep plodding, keep being faithful, keep trying, don't give up. And the Lord will, in his due season, take it to where he wants to take it and do what he wants to do. And so when we think about the future, Brian, he's already done more with this than maybe what we anticipated or thought.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're just trying to not mess it up. We're trying to not mess up a good thing. Man, we would love to see 42 become 41 and then 40 and 39 and get down to 0, because we think everyone deserves a chance to hear the gospel. But we know we can't control it. We can just do our part. And so we'll just stay faithful, do our part. And we don't know if it's going to turn into 10 million, 20 million, support hundreds. I mean, we're already supporting hundreds of missionaries. I don't know if that's going to turn into thousands or tens of thousands. Lord willing, we will. But yeah, I don't know what the future holds. And that's not coy. That's not trying to hold back on you. That's just honest. Like, don't know what the Lord's got with it.
Well, honestly, I feel like that's a great thing to hear from a leader, because there is a fair bit of pressure in our culture, and I would say in leadership culture, have this plan, have the vision, and there is a place for that. And I bless God when he gives somebody this is the 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, all that. Love it. If they've got it, then great. But there is, it's nice to say, hey, there is a place for we don't exactly know. And honestly, in this day and age, even in the marketplace, anybody who feels like they've got the exact 5-year plan, I go, oh, well, we'll see. We'll see how all that works out. You know, there's one question that I wanted to ask that we didn't ask, and then you referenced something very similar to what I was going to ask. It feels like that the journey with Project 42 has been pretty up and to the right from the jump. Would you say at this point, have you dealt with anything that you would put in the category of, oh man, this was really tough. This was just a setback or an obstacle or something that caused you? I know you said the early days almost, what made me think of it is you said almost stopped before we got started. But once you got started, it feels like, man, this has been a roller coaster in a good way, I guess, going up and to the right. But yeah, any big challenge?
Oh, yeah, lots of them. I mean, as leaders, we can make things sound so good sometimes. But I remember meeting with the guy at Caribou, a local little coffee shop in Minnesota. And it was a great meeting. And he was trying to get his mind around what Project 42 is all about. How do we do our funding? How do we pick our partners? Is this a good place for us to invest? So we were talking through all those details. And it was a good conversation. I felt good about it. I walked out and I got a text from our largest supporter. And he said, hey, we had some situation in our church and we're not going to be able to fulfill our pledge. And I was like, whoa, that's like our top supporter.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that is a real kick in the pants right there. And so I called him and I just said, just trying to get an understanding of like, what do you think you're going to be able to do? And it was basically from the largest to almost nothing.
Whew.
And it's an extenuating circumstance. And 2 years later, they were able to more than fulfill it. So praise the Lord. But at that moment, I didn't know what was going to happen 2 years later.
We call those make you want to puke moments in leadership.
Oh, bro, you're not wrong. Like, I remember like hitting end of the call, and I tried to be cool. I was like, hey, the Lord is faithful to good. But I'm telling you, inside I was dying because I was like, what in the world? And I got in my vehicle, and I'm not making this up, Brian. I got a call from a guy had never been to a gathering. And he called me and he goes, I just had a guy walk into my office and give us a massive check. And we want to give a large portion to you guys. And I was like, give me the scope of what we're talking about. Like, how excited are we? And it was more than our largest donation.
Wow.
That had just told me. And it was in that moment was like, you can't do this. Like, this is not through your wiser persuasive. This isn't through your strategy. This isn't like, if I'm in it, I'm going to take care of it. You have to be faithful, but and so we've had moments like that over and over and over, where it's, man, this is not going to go well. And, the Lord's faithful and there's good. To planning, I thought of this question or this thought though. Every time our leadership team gets together, this is one question that we ask ourselves is, what would we do differently if we were twice as big? So we don't know if we're going to get twice as big. We don't know how long it's going to take, if that's the trajectory, if we're going to go back before we go up or whatever. But what we don't want to happen is the things that we're doing today to prevent us from being twice as big.
That's good.
And so even though we don't know what the future is, we don't know where we're going, we do want to ask ourselves good and hard questions of like, what does staffing look like if we're twice as big? What does our budget look like if we're twice as big? What do I as a leader have to do? What do the next level leaders have to do differently if we were twice as big, impacting twice as many locations and places? And would we have to do multiple gatherings? What are the logistics of that? And so I think there are good principles and practices, even though you can't control things in the future, you can ask yourself good questions that will help you prepare for the future.
Well, that's really good. That's super practical, and I'm sure that many folks can right now start to make an exercise like that present in their own life or their company. I mean, because you could do that personally too. You could say, if I had, whatever. I mean, you come up with some scenarios where it releases some constraints and it frees up your mind and heart to dream a little bit, and then potentially start laying out some track to move towards those dreams. Justin, I just so have valued our friendship with you, and you and Tara are doing an incredible job with Project 42. I hope and pray that some folks hear this podcast and they immediately jump to your website. We'll have it in all of our show notes, and get on board and kind of find out more about Project 42. But just know we're grateful for your leadership, super grateful for your friendship. I love that, and I've done this now, as you know, several times where I or Christina will text you about something. I don't know how you respond so quickly because, you've got a couple things going on, but I just know I'm super encouraged every time I get a text from you, and appreciate your support. It's just been a big deal to us here at Engedi, so thank you.
The feeling is mutual, Brian, and I don't just say that on the show. I've told you that privately. I think the world of you guys, and you're leading the way in so many ways, and anything we can do to help, I'm quick to text back, would be honored to help. So love you guys.
Thanks for coming on Made to Advance, Justin. Good talking to you. I love that conversation with Justin, and what I particularly appreciated about what he said is they had a little notion of an idea, a nudge, and they were faithful walking it out. And maybe God's put something in your heart today, and it may not be starting an organization. It may be walking across the street and talking to your neighbor. It may be having a conversation at work. It may be starting something. It may be volunteering at your church in a new way. But I just want to encourage you, take the nudge he's given you and be faithful to it. There are so many voices in our minds and in our hearts that will try to talk us down from taking a step of risk or faith. And yet, so often for us to actually advance requires taking a step of risk and faith. And so, boy, be encouraged by Justin's example, because as we saw through his story, when you offer your few fish or your few loaves to God, we have a God who can take that offering and multiply it. And I know that's what he's going to do through your faithfulness and through your obedience. Hope you've enjoyed this conversation. If you have, please rate and review us. That helps us get the word out about the podcast. This has been a production of Engedi Church. We've got some incredible conversations coming your way. And so until next time, just know God made you to advance.